everybody, my name is Matilda and welcome back to my channel. I am wearing a little hat today to try and hide my bad, messy hair. I hope you guys don't mind. I think it's pretty cute, my little train driver hat. So for today's video, I'm going to be walking you guys through how to choose your perfect foundation. Picking a foundation is one of the hardest things to do in my opinion because there are so many shades and finishes to choose from, and if you don't know much about your skin or the kind of thing that you want from your foundation, then it can be super overwhelming and really hard to know where to start. So hopefully the 6 steps that I have put together can help you make that whole process a lot easier and maybe lead you to finding your perfect holy grail foundation. If you are excited for this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up, and while you're down there, subscribe to my channel if you want to see some more videos from me. So without further ado, let's get started. So step number 1 is to work out what skin type you have. This is obviously very important because what works really well for one skin type is potentially going to be terrible for another. So I've kind of broken it down into 5 different skin types, and I'm going to walk you through kind of what characterizes each one so you can figure out which one is most suited to what your skin is like. So the first skin type I'm going to talk about is oily skin. The oily skin type is characterized by your foundation disappearing or melting off in areas or all over your face before the day is out, looking very shiny at the end of the day. Usually oily skin types have very visible large pores, and often this skin type is very prone to breakouts. However, this isn't always the case. The second skin type is dry. Dry skin often feels very tight. It can be very flaky and rough in patches or all over the skin, and it can also usually look very dull and just not very glowy and bright. Normal skin can be defined as a balanced skin type. So this skin type usually has very fine pores and a very velvety, smooth and soft skin texture. Minor problems with blemishes and breakouts, and you're usually not very prone to sensitivity. Number 4 is combination skin. So combination skin is a mix of the different skin types, usually showing the variation between the T-zone and the outer perimeters of the face. Typically, a combination skin type will have an oily T-zone and then normal to dry cheeks. And finally, sensitive skin obviously speaks for itself. It's someone who has a skin type that is very irritated by products and often quite red and just not having a good time. Once you have worked out what skin type you have, it'll be a lot easier to distinguish what kind of foundations are going to work well for you. For example, I have quite normal to sometimes dry skin, and if I'm watching a YouTube review on a foundation and the YouTuber has oily skin and it works really well for them, I know that I'm probably going to steer clear from that because it's probably not going to work that well for me. That being said, some foundations that work really well on other YouTubers with normal to dry skin haven't worked well on me at all, and that can come down to the finish of the foundation. And that leads us on to step number 2, which is to work out what finish you want in your foundation. Usually this goes hand in hand with your skin type. So people with dry skin will usually prefer something that is more dewy and glowy, whereas someone with oily skin will prefer a more matte finish. This is because we usually want to kind of balance out our skin type and give our skin what it doesn't have naturally. But of course that doesn't always have to be the case. You could be someone with oily skin that loves that dewy finish, but it just has to come down to your personal preference and what works well for you. However, if you do want that dewy look and you are oily, for example, there's usually other ways that you can achieve that which isn't your foundation. The reason I say this is because a dewy foundation usually won't last on someone with oily skin. It'll just break apart and just melt off your face throughout the day, which obviously we don't want. But you could achieve that dewy finish with highlighter, for example. It's not always the foundation that's going to get you the look that you want and the effect that you want. What I'm trying to say is that it's also important to consider what works with the lasting power that you need from your foundation. Personally, I prefer a dewy, luminous finish for the daytime and for nighttime or events I prefer a more natural satin finish. Of course, this can also be achieved with other products that you use with your foundation. For example, with one foundation I can make it more dewy for daytime with an illuminator, or more satin matte for nighttime with some powder. Step 3 is to decide what coverage you want from your foundation. This one is all about your personal preference. The coverage I like depends on the situation that I'm wearing the foundation for. So for daytime I prefer a natural coverage, but for nighttime and events I prefer a more medium full coverage foundation. You can always build up the coverage with most foundations, but if you know that you want a full coverage foundation, I wouldn't start with a BB cream, for example. The coverage that works best for you can sometimes be dependent on your skin type as well. For example, if you have oily skin, you may find that you need something more full coverage to last on you if your skin fades throughout the day. But again, that isn't always the case. You can find light coverage foundations that work for a more oily skin type. Step 4 is to do some research. I always like to do some research before I buy a foundation because I don't want to waste my time and money on a foundation that just isn't going to work for me in the first place. I usually go to YouTube reviews because I like to see how the foundation actually applies to the skin, as I think this better helps me determine what's going to look good on my skin type. But if you are just going into a shop to pick something up, look for terminology in the name or description that suits the coverage, finish and skin type that you want from your foundation. And of course, don't forget to use the shop assistants. Tell them what you want in those 3 areas and they should be able to find something that best suits what you want to achieve with your foundation. Step number 5 is to pick the right foundation shade. If you can, try on the foundation in store. When you are testing the color against something, test it against your neck or your chest because that is what you want the color to match to. Usually your arm is going to be a lot darker than your neck or chest, and you don't want the foundation to be matching this. You want it to be matching what is closest to your face. But you don't want to match it to your actual face because your actual face is usually a lot paler than your neck or chest. You want everything to look very uniform and cohesive and like you're all the same color. If I'm wanting to pick up a color that matches my fake tan, but I'm not fake tanned at the time, I like to take in a color that I know matches me when I'm fake tanned, and I will swatch it next to the foundations that I'm looking at buying. So basically I'm matching one foundation to another foundation that I know matches me color-wise. Another tip that's super helpful if you want your foundation to match you perfectly is to walk out of the store for a bit and see if the color changes tone or gets any darker. Some foundations, when they are exposed to the air, can change tone, so they can go from looking very yellow to in fact turning very pink, which if you are a yellow skin tone, you obviously don't want a pink foundation. And some foundations can actually dry down a lot darker than what they look when you swatch them wet on your hand. So swatch them, leave the store, walk around for a bit and come back, and that will just make sure that the foundation is a 100% match. This isn't absolutely necessary to know if you are matching your foundation in person because you can just match it to the color, but it can help you narrow down by shade name what foundations are likely to work for you. And this is to work out what undertone you are. Most foundations are usually categorized into 2 different areas, which is warm with yellow undertones or cool with pink undertones, which are red undertones if you have a deeper skin tone. I can usually tell by looking at someone what undertone they are, but if you're not sure, you can always do the vein trick. So take a look at the veins on your wrist, and if they look more green, you're likely to be a warm yellow undertone, and if they are more blue, you're more likely to be a cool pink undertone. And if you can't really decide, you're probably somewhere in the middle and you're a neutral undertone. I find that not all foundations really cater for the neutral undertones, but my personal preference is if I was neutral, I would go for yellow because I find that pink undertones in foundations are usually super duper intense and pink, and I don't find that looks good on a lot of people. Unless, of course, that is the match to your actual skin tone. I also find that if you are very pink and you don't like that, it might be helpful to actually go for a warmer foundation. So my mum is a perfect example. She doesn't like all of the pink redness in her face. So instead of going for an NW in MAC, which is stupidly W for cool instead of C for cool, but anyway, instead of going for an NW in MAC, she will go instead for an NC because the yellow is going to cancel out the pinkness in her face. If you can't go in store and match your foundation in person, I would recommend a website called the TEMPTALIA Foundation Matrix. This website is amazing because you can put in a shade of a foundation that you already have and then search what the match for it is in the foundation that you want to buy. I also like to look for YouTubers that have the same shade as me. So for example, when I'm pale, I'm the same shade as Nikki Tutorials. So if she uses a foundation that I'm interested in buying, I know that her shade is going to be the match for me when I'm pale. So once you have narrowed down the foundation shade that is perfect for you, step number 6 is to get a sample if you can. Even if every single factor seems like it'll work for you, sometimes it doesn't. The perfect example of that for me is the Too Faced Born This Way. From all the reviews I saw of it and the research that I did of the foundation, it seemed like it would be the perfect foundation for me. But the way that the foundation looked on my skin, it was just really dry and a weird texture, and it just didn't work. Luckily, I was able to return the foundation, but if I wasn't, I would be left with $100 worth of foundation that I couldn't use because I didn't like the foundation. It is always better to take the time and test it out and make sure that it works for you before you take the plunge and buy a foundation, especially if the foundation is high-end and pretty pricey. You don't want foundation regret later. You can always try and fix foundations with illuminators, primers, and powders, but if you can, just try and test it out beforehand so you don't have to worry about adding things to it to make it work for you. So those are my 6 tips for choosing the perfect foundation for you. Let me know down below if you have found your Holy Grail foundation and what it is, and also what skin type you are, because if you're the same as me, I would love to know and find some more foundations that are going to look amazing on me as well. Thank you so much as always for watching. Make sure to give this video a like if it helped you out and you enjoyed it, and while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you want to see some more from me, and turn on the bell icon so you get notified every time that I upload a new video, which is once a week. Thank you again as always for taking the time to come over here on my channel and watch my videos. I love you guys so much, and I hope to see you in my next one. Bye guys!